Hi, welcome back. I am your host, Pam Rogers.
And I'm Mara Dole, and we're so happy that you're here.
Mara, our guest today is the Honorable Mike Rogers, the former congressman from the state of Michigan.
I know, it looks like he's thinking about running for president. Isn't that right, Pam?
I think he is. He's making some trips up to New Hampshire, which is always an indication. And I'm hoping today that we may get an answer from him as to, what he's thinking. Also, I definitely want to talk to him about the recent intel leaks that have rocked our intelligence community, because when he was in Congress, he chaired the powerful House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. So the intelligence field is really, his forte for sure. And I also want to talk about President Trump running for president again, and about the potential Republican field in general.
Oh, I love his thoughts on the Republican field, especially when you see what's happening with Ron DeSantis right now. He's dropping in the polls. He's losing financial support. He's making all sorts of, I think, outlandish, inappropriate proposals, building a prison next to Disney World. I mean, I don't really know what he's thinking. He seems increasingly desperate to me. And I know that Congressman Rogers has said he does not think that Trump could win a general election. And that may be one of the reasons why he's looking at this. So definitely want to find out what he has to say about that whole field.
I really do too. He tweeted out something really interesting in regards to President Trump and the Republican field in general. But I have to disagree with you. I am a huge Ron DeSantis fan. I
Are you now?
Fantastic job, in Florida, and I've always felt, and I think it's kind of just a common perception that people have, that governors make better presidential candidates than senators or congressmen. And I think that's because the governors can say, hey, I ran a budget, right? I ran a huge billion-dollar budget. I've handled all of these different committees. I've handled all these different issues. When senators and congressmen are a little bit more hands-off, right? And they don't really have that budget experience or being the leader of a state.
But I have to ask you, Pam, I mean, this is going to Spirit, and we've promised our listeners that we're going to go there. So I want to go there with you because I know you're pro-choice. And I know Ron DeSantis is not.
I can get in my car and punch you in the nose. Just want to let you know that.
Why?
I'm just kidding. But Ron DeSantis is pro-life.
Right.
Yeah, I've always said you can't agree with every candidate on every issue. I mean, if you did that, I think that would just be odd. I think it's okay to have different thought in the party, and they're right, Republican Party, there is a huge faction of pro-choice Republicans. I know here in New Hampshire that has always been something that's been seen for sure and proven, that there is a large amount of pro-choice Republicans.
Well, and I'm reminded of when I had then U.S. Senator Scott Brown on my radio show. He was, of course, a Republican. He had won in the seat that had been held by Ted Kennedy for decades. I asked him what it took to win as a Republican in Massachusetts. And he said, you have to be a pro-choice moderate. I think the same is true today.
Oh, in Massachusetts, for sure.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you. I think any candidate in Massachusetts that's Republican that wants to be successful, I think has to be a moderate, right? I mean, Massachusetts is not well known for being the bastion of conservative Republicanism.
I mean, we've had a lot of Republican governors, most recently Charlie Baker, but Ron DeSantis could not get elected in Massachusetts. Forget it. Never.
But Ron DeSantis could get elected in New Hampshire, although we love our governor, Chris Sununu. I mean, and he's not going anywhere, luckily. But
he might be running for president.
Running for president, yeah. I definitely am really interested in hearing Congressman Rogers' thoughts on all the potential people, because I was watching Fox News a couple days ago, and they, up on the screen, they put up about, I don't know, 15 to 20 faces of potential Republican candidates. So there's a really large field out there.
Potentially quite large. And of course, that benefits former President Trump, because the more fragmentation there is among the people who don't support him, and the more he just holds on to his base, which apparently he does, even if it's only 27%, there's a huge field, then that could be enough to get the nomination.
Right. For sure. Right. I mean, anytime that you are splitting the field with that many candidates, you know, it's always interesting to see what happens. And
it is. Now we just have a few more minutes before former Congressman Rogers joins us. Pam, I just want to ask you, you've been watching a new Netflix miniseries called American Manhunt, the Boston Marathon bombing, and that's had a big impact on you. Can you tell us about that?
you know, it has, because like you and I both agree that the Boston Marathon bombing had a huge impact on New England, Massachusetts,
Yes.
Boston, all of us.
Yes.
That event. And I did watch that 3-part Netflix over the weekend, and it was really interesting. I think the takeaway for me was the statements by Ed Davis, who at the time was the commissioner of the Boston Police, is now retired.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Davis talked about how the FBI had come to a realization a few days later that there were 2 suspects, and they had photographs of these 2 suspects. And Ed Davis wanted to get those photos out immediately. And the FBI did not. And about 24 hours later, a leak occurred, and those photos were shown to the media. They went everywhere.
I remember.
And Ed Davis was asked by the interviewer, do you feel that Officer Sean Collier would still be alive today had those been dispersed 24 hours earlier? And, you know, Ed Davis, I don't think he said yes, but I think he nodded in the affirmative.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to split with law enforcement per se, but he's a believer that had that been distributed prior to when it was, it's potentially could have saved the life of Sean Collier, who, if you don't know and you're listening, he was an MIT police officer who was shot and killed by the older Tsarnaev brother just before they went on their, you know, escapade through Watertown.
Right, right. And I mean, what a tough call to make. And I do remember that there was some talk that people had pictures of the suspects, they weren't being released, and then all of a sudden they were leaked. What I remember most about it is the secure in place order. This was unprecedented. The entire metropolitan area of Boston was absolutely shut down. You could not leave your home. My daughter was living in one of the towns that was affected at the time. I called her at 6 o'clock in the morning and told her not to leave her house. It was terrifying, but everybody did it. I had friends who were living in Watertown, which is ultimately where the younger Tsarnaev brother was apprehended, and in Watertown, and I'm sure in other areas as well. Law enforcement officers were going door to door, knocking on people's doors, going into their homes and searching, and everyone cooperated, and ultimately it worked. And I think that what was most powerful about this was the idea that we were sending such a strong message to anybody who was inclined to do anything like that, that if you do this, we will shut down, and in one of the biggest cities in the country, we'll lock it down, and we will not stop until we find you, and we will find you. And I think that was a really powerful message, and I was really proud of Boston for doing that, and for the response that we still call Boston Strong today.
Right, exactly. It was fantastic. Law enforcement was fantastic. Deserve all the praise. So I recommend that. I also recommend Michelle McPhee's book called Mayhem on the same topic. But Mara, right now, it is time to bring on the congressman. This is super exciting.
It is, but he's not in the waiting room yet.
Oh, he's not. Okay,
no,
well, that's
he's not in the waiting room.
fine. All right, I'm just going to remind our listeners.
No, we're gonna make a note to the editor. They're gonna cut this whole thing out. So moving forward, because I know when someone's in the waiting room, I'll be the one who says, "Oh, look who's joined us." I'm now, when I got, by the way, the response, the RSVP, it did say 11 o'clock on the RSVP. So I'm assuming that
They're aware of it.
They have the right time, but I'm wondering. I'm just gonna pause the recording. Just remember, if you want to stay in touch with Going Disparate, you can follow us on YouTube and subscribe and post comments. We're on iTunes, we're on Google, we're on Spotify. You can find us on Insta, Twitter, and Facebook at Going Disparate, and you can email us at pamandmara@gmail.com. And now,
Are we? Here we go.
here we go. We're so excited.
Hello, Congressman Rogers. I don't think we can hear you.
You're muted.
You know, I do my best work on mute.
We are thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much. Sorry for the mix up there in the beginning.
It's all good.
I want to introduce you to our listeners. We are with the Honorable Mike Rogers today. Mike is a former member of Congress representing Michigan's 8th Congressional District and previously served as an officer in the U.S. Army and was an FBI special agent. And while in Congress, Mr. Rogers chaired the powerful House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, where he authorized and oversaw a budget of $70 billion, that's billion with a B, that funded the nation's 17 intelligence agencies. In Congress, the congressman worked across the aisle with 2 presidents, congressional leadership, countless diplomats, military service members, and intelligence professionals to ensure the brave men and women who fight for our nation are equipped with the resources necessary to get the job done. And Washington Post columnist David Ignatius remarked, Mike was a rare example of bipartisanship. So welcome, Congressman Rogers.
Well, thank you so much, Pamela. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think my mother wrote that. I'm going to keep that.
Well, that's really what we're all about. I'm a Democrat. Pam is a Republican. We don't always agree on things, but we like each other and we respect each other's opinions. And we want to have more conversations like that. So you're a perfect guest for the show. And given your intelligence background, I'm guessing that you were maybe even more horrified than we were with the revelation that a National Guard airsman had disclosed dozens of secret documents that revealed sensitive intelligence and defense information. How could this have happened?
Yeah, and so this is interesting because it's the second time that the military has had somebody in their IT department. Remember the Chelsea Manning case a few years ago? Same kind of role where she was taking information that was flying by, and he was a specialist in the Army, I believe, at the time. So he didn't really understand the information. It wasn't designed for him to read it or analyze it, or he wasn't trained on how to dissect it. Reached into that IT and pulled it out and then caused it to be disclosed. Same here. This is a really interesting case. Same kind of a thing. He saw information flying by. He was an IT guy, and he reached in, and in his mind, in his world, not trained, didn't understand analytics, was able to get in and get at least copies of this and then take pictures of them. And so there was some protocols broken there that allowed him to get those hard copies to be able to take a picture. But it's the same kind of a motivation. I see something, I don't really understand it, but I want to show my friends I'm really important. And it leads down this path until we get a really serious breach of national security.
Congressman, do you know how that can be stopped in the future? I mean, I'm not familiar with the whole system. You are. Is there a way that can be prevented in the future?
Well, we're going to have to know exactly what happened. Here's my guess. Let me put my FBI hat on here for a second. I think somebody in his department ordered that he wanted to see that material and had it printed out. That's going to be my guess. And through that process of that printed out material, he was able to get it. That really shouldn't happen. And so it's not just this airman that's going to get in trouble. I think somebody in their chain of command should get in trouble for doing something that would be a little bit around the protocols. You know, there's really good protections in civilian intelligence side for downloading, copying, really good technology now where if you copy something, I know what it is, I know where it is, I know if you have access to it, all of those things. they're going to have to apply that throughout the whole entire DoD system. If in fact they needed to even see this information, I'm still a little concerned why it was up in a National Guard unit in Massachusetts was seeing things that had to do with a source of information back in Russia. I'm not sure that somebody needs to look at the distribution lists as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm just incredulous. This is someone who graduated from high school in 2020.
Yeah.
I'm just dumbfounded.
Yeah, I mean, and think about it. He's reading things that were just beyond his probably comprehension. Again, not trained for it. He's trained on how to handle classified information, not trained on analytics and what does it mean. And oh, by the way, if you disclose one little piece of this, counterintelligence agencies in Russia, in Iran, in China will kind of re-engineer it. They'll say, okay, how did they get it? Is it a person? Was it an electronic intercept? Was it data intercept? I want to know how they got that information. They'll spend a lot of time and effort. And if it was a human being that helped us get that information, you can imagine that somebody's life is in danger.
Right, exactly. What do you think will happen to him? I know this is like a prediction, but what do you think, based on your experience, will happen to this young man?
So it's really hard to prove the espionage portion of these things. I'm going to guess he's going to get charged with, illegal removal of documents, being in possession of documents he didn't have authority to possess. So he'll probably get charged and everything packaged up probably around that 10 to 15 year mark. Sometimes judges go lower. And I do think they have to throw the book at this kid. I know that sounds harsh, but you have to send a message to these people that this is not your information. You have no right to disclose it, and you're causing real harm to the men and women who are out putting their necks on the line, trying to make us safe all around the world. And I think that's what's going to happen. Just seeing the frequency of these cases and the kinds of charges and then jail time that they get.
Congressman, what impact do you think this leak has on our allies who trust us with intelligence, with their intelligence?
Yeah, this is not good. And for a whole host of reasons, I think the South Koreans were obviously very, very upset. The Egyptians were upset. Israelis were upset. And part of that reason is they always say that there's no real friend in the intelligence business, right? Everybody is distrustful of everybody in that business. And so it's important to collect information to make sure our policymakers, American policymakers, have the best information possible about intent. What are people intending to do? And if there's something bad in there, what are they using to do it? How are they doing it? All of those things. And so when any of that gets disclosed and it embarrasses our allies, it makes them trust us less. This is a cleanup on aisle 9. We are going to have to reach out and work with these allies to try to regain their trust. And again, this isn't the first time it's happened. It happened in the Chelsea Manning WikiLeaks, Edward Snowden. Those leaks really hurt us with our allies. And so all of the volume of this, if you're an ally, you start asking, what kind of things do I want to share with the United States? We better be careful about that. And that's what's so hurtful when these kind of leaks happen.
And I did feel very strongly in the Edward Snowden case. There were folks who thought he should be pardoned or whatever. I didn't agree with that. I thought that we needed a trial because I wanted to know what happened. I didn't know what he had taken. I didn't know what he had done with that. And I sort of feel the same way here. I feel that we've got to prioritize understanding exactly what happened, exactly what was taken, and exactly where it went.
I agree. I was part of those. I was chairman at that time, and so I did some of the damage assessment on some of the materials that he stole. And what people don't realize is the things that he said he was upset about was about 2% of all the material he stole. He stole millions and millions of pages of equivalent of really sensitive information, downloaded it, and now is living in Moscow. In the custody of the FSB. It's really damaging stuff.
Right. So the argument was, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say I'm with you. I think he's a traitor.
Right.
I don't think it's coincidence that he's in Russia. And the information he gave was very damaging to even our soldiers in Afghanistan. To certain things that were taken gave clues on how we would react to certain kind of activities. And that information in the hands of the Russians meant that the Taliban had it, and pretty dangerous.
Right, right.
Um,
So, go ahead.
What about, if you can refresh my memory, I just remember a couple years back, I'm not sure when it was, there was a leak that the United States was monitoring Angela Merkel's, was it telephone calls or something along those lines? Could you refresh my memory about what that was and how that came about?
Yes, boy, would I like the year of my life back that year. I should say. That was part of the Edward Snowden materials that were stolen.
Oh,
And you have to remember this. So Germany is a NATO country. It's an Article 5 country. They were having conversations with both Russia at that time and China at that time that many believed were not in the interests of the United States, right? And sometimes countries who can be friends have different interests in the United States. And my argument is, if you have an Article 5 country, it's probably pretty that it might get our young men and women in harm's way, right? If they trigger Article 5 under the NATO ruling, that means we would be going to war with them. I think it's okay that we try to understand fully about what they're up to, because I don't want my sons and daughters out there fighting on a mistake that Germany made or any other NATO country made. And so I didn't think it was all that. It sounded terrible up front, but I have to tell you, it's good to make sure that your interests are protected. And I think that I disagreed with Obama at the time. He cut it off. He said, we're not doing anything like this anymore, even though that they had previously authorized all of those things. And my argument is, listen, it's no harm, no foul. When the president of the United States travels, including Obama at that time, they have to take this big set of equipment, even in a hotel room, that tries to make sure people can't eavesdrop on these conversations, right? Because we all know that everybody is trying to listen to those conversations. And
right.
so it was, again, it's all about putting it in perspective. If you have a country that can get you into a lot of trouble, I would like to know what they're thinking. That's all. Nothing, it wasn't anything personal or anything of that nature. It was all, what was your relationship with China? Why are you working with Russians in a way that didn't seem productive? And so all of those kinds of things come out in that. And that was that whole case. And again, with Snowden, who didn't put any context on it, just threw it out there, right? And I think the Russians helped them get it out there, candidly. And so there you have it. Now it makes the United States look bad that we're doing these terrible things that every other NATO country is doing to every other NATO country, by the way.
Well, now just switching gears a little bit, want to know now what you're thinking about something. It's been reported that you are exploring a run for president. Have you made a decision?
No decisions yet. My wife and I started this group called leadamerica.org. And for the simple reason, we were having coffee one day and we woke up and said, something doesn't feel right. The country does not seem like it's on the right track. The economy is not getting better. China is moving out and saying that they're going to push the US off the international stage. And it just didn't seem like our politics were rising up to the occasion. We're America's politics bigger than our problem. And we thought, nope, they're sure not right now. If you look at our politics, it seems small and petty everywhere. And so we decided we'd take it onto ourselves to get out and around and have a conversation with Americans about, hey, are we ready to solve hard problems, to get ready? And we should be doing this already, to compete with China. Great example, China is teaching their 8th graders quantum mechanics. And think of this, last year, 2/3 of 8th graders in the United States couldn't read at grade level, the 8th grade level. And then also in the 8th grade, almost 3/4 of them couldn't perform math proficiently at the 8th grade level. It is really hard to see how we can continue to compete and have an economy that allows all of our citizens to participate in and be prosperous, given the way we're kind of headed out. And so we've had lots of conversations. Here's the interesting thing. Every time we go, we get invited back to have these conversations. And they're pretty serious. They're a little sober. But my argument is, we have this big problem brewing. And my kids and my kids' kids are going to have to deal with this China problem for a very long time. And so we better put ourselves in a position so that they can make good decisions and still have the prosperity that they have today.
I've read a few of your op-eds in regards to China, and they're really interesting. So I definitely would suggest to our listeners that they should check out some of your op-eds because they are really, really interesting. I live in New Hampshire, Congressman. I don't think you know that, but I live in New Hampshire. I've lived here the vast majority of my life. I have met, I don't know, hundreds, 200 candidates for president over the years, and listened. I've gone to, like, in my local town hall, I've listened to Democrats talk, I've listened to Republicans talk. When I was really young, I remember walking down the street with my mom, and we ran into Paul Simon. I think he was a senator.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
And we had just come out of the drugstore, and he was like, hello, I'm thinking about running for president. And my mom and I were like, oh, hi, how are you? But that's what I love about New Hampshire. I love our retail politics. I love just going to someone's home and being able to meet people like you and have like really interesting conversations. And so I hope you spend a lot of time in New Hampshire talking to potential candidates, because I think you have a tremendous amount to add to the conversation.
Well, thank you. And so far on our rule for, this is no small feat by any stretch of the imagination. And my wife is, completely with me on this and a part of this actually, is if we stop getting invited back, people said, hey, I've heard enough. Then we say, fine, that's good enough for us. But what we're finding is the opposite is happening. So we're coming back to New Hampshire again next week for a few days, and then we're going back in the first week of May. And it's really because people have said, come out, we want to hear what you're talking about, what your solutions are. And I think people are ready for, yes, here's the problems, but how about some optimistic solutions that we can actually agree on and get done? And that's what I think is connecting with people in New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina.
I wanted to get your thoughts on some really key issues that I think are hurting Republicans, and I think will hurt the Republican nominee, whoever they are, unless they change course on some of these. The youth vote is increasing all the time. In your home state of Michigan, you got the highest youth vote turnout in the country. And the three issues that they care about the most are the ones where they agree with Democrats. And those are guns, climate change, and reproductive rights. So how are you going to appeal to those voters? I don't know what your positions are on those three issues, but how would you address those?
So let me start with climate change. And I try to tell the folks that that I know that are part of the green movement, if you want to get to a carbon neutral, carbon free economy, you have to be energy independent, and so that you can't make anything in an isolated decision. And so what we talk about is, listen, let's get the economy going. Let's actually ramp up our ability to be energy independent now. And you use parts of those monies to invest in technologies that are going to get us there quicker. All of these one-offs, we're going to all be driving electric cars in 2035. Two problems with that. One, that means we have to process minerals that go into electric cars. The current administration just turned down 2 of those mines. And guess what happens? It goes to China to be processed. So 90% of what goes into an electric car is now processed in China. You can't disadvantage us for a nation that knows that they want us to, push us off the world stage and give them the ability to turn off our ability to even meet our own requirements here at home. And so be energy independent, so that doesn't get us entangled in Middle East politics or other places. It allows us the resources and economy we need to invest in better technology. I would use nuclear as a part of this. We have these small nuclear reactors that are very clean, very efficient. They don't have the big footprint like the old models do, where we could actually take whole cities off the grid. And you need to do that if you're going to plug cars into the grid. And so it's just a matter about saying, okay, we have to be realistic. We have to understand where we want to go. And then you have to tie it all together. You don't get to say we're going to have gas cars without fixing the fact that we can't mine, develop, and process those materials here in the United States. We have to go to China to get them. That's the wrong answer. We're going to lose that fight, and China would have the ability to turn that off. So I do think that there's some great things that we can do in the environment between now and 2025 or 2050. We know we're going to have carbon for a while, so let's make the best of it. just through the things that I just talked about. I have also talked about, listen, we have a violence problem in America, and we have a mental health problem in America like I've never seen before. In 2021, 10% of teenage girls attempted suicide. Think of this, attempted suicide in the United States. 30% thought about it. I've just never seen those numbers. We should be absolutely we should be in free fall here as parents and community leaders about, okay, something's going on in this generation that maybe we don't understand. The pressures that are on these kids is so much different than ever before. And so I think social media is a part of that. We need to understand that. If you look at the last two shootings, both were suicidal, both had mental health issues going into this, and both wanted to die in the way that they died. That's a problem that gets well before we even have a gun conversation. Gun conversations are going to be very divisive. We better come together on what's going on the mental health issues here in the United States. It is really staggering. In the violence problem, and think about it, people drive cars into parades and throw people on train tracks. The stabbings that we've seen, kind of the upswing. I just think we're going to have an honest conversation the way we haven't had before. By the way, marijuana psychosis events are on the rise in the United States. And it's mainly because the THC content is higher, and it's causing people to commit crimes, commit violence, do other things. But we don't want to talk about it because we're in this big rush to legalize drugs in the United States. My argument is we better have a really hard conversation in America between parents, community leaders, and each other about what do we want for the future for our kids, and what pressures are they under that apparently we just didn't have when we were growing up. We better understand that. We don't understand it. And lastly, I've said, an abortion is the most personal decision between a family and faith of someone that they can ever have, and it's traumatic, and there's lots that goes into it. I think the states are going to have to figure out what this looks like. I don't know if the federal government should be involved in it. And what you're going to find is each state is going to find its own water. New Hampshire just did 24 weeks. Other states, I think, are going to have some place in there. And so what I think, as a pro-life guy my whole life, I think we're going to find out that last trimester is probably not the thing we should be talking about abortion. What is the right place for people to have enough time to go through this horrible and personal decision? And then as pro-life movement people, I think they need to circle around, how do you help women? If you think that they should not, then how are you helping those women get to that decision and take care of the needs that they have? And again, such a personal, intense decision. When I hear people talk about they're going to make, criminals out of these women, it's just absolutely the wrong thing, the wrong end of the stick to be talking about. We need to be talking about how we help heal and give them other opportunities. I think there's ways to talk about all of these things in a way that attracts, but the problem today is that everything has to be that 30-second bumper sticker soundbite, and then they want to beat you up with it for the next whatever so many months. I think America's a lot more complicated than that. I think they're a lot more sober than that. I think that folks will make the right decision given the opportunity to make the right decision, and we're just going to have to give people that right decision.
Yeah, Congressman, you in March you did an interview with a woman from the Hill, and you stated, I think it's fantastic. You stated, "Sometimes country needs us more than our party ever will need us. I think it's that time that we have to focus on real solutions." And I think everything you've been talking with us about today is very practical and really bipartisan in a certain sense. And I couldn't agree with you more when you stated that to Caroline Bakel from the Hill. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, candidly, we're in a bit of trouble. Medicare is going to go into cash deficit in 2028. Nobody wants to talk about it. I think there are some things we can do that doesn't involve cuts, that gets really creative. We haven't modernized our government. It's a 19th century design trying to solve 20th century problems with 20th century tools. And by the way, it's the 21st century. We haven't modernized anything that allows the government to be more effective, more efficient, and doesn't cost as much. It's huge. The government has exploded over the last decade, really. with no end in sight. And my argument is we can't afford it. The interest payment on the debt which we borrow is going to be larger than the Defense Department here pretty soon. And it's serious. And that's just the interest payment we have to make every year. That takes away from any other good thing you think the government might or should be doing. And so I think that there's a way to have these conversations that rallies people to this notion that, listen, we have got to put our country ahead of our parties, at least for a while. And America has always been bigger than her problems, but it doesn't seem like we're there now. It seems like we can't get ahead of our problems. I just think we need to understand that China is moving out. They're trying to take our global currency reserve status away, right? Which will impact all of our standard of living. Their Navy is now bigger than the US Navy. They're the third largest and probably most modern nuclear fleet or nuclear arsenal country in the world. They're talking about moving troops around the world to protect natural resources of which they will need to build the kinds of things they want to build. Talking about being data dominant. My argument is we can solve all these problems, but here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to kind of rally around it. Here's my other one. We have a literacy crisis in America. It's a literacy crisis. I talked a little bit about that. If you learn to read by the third grade, you read to learn after the third grade. If you're not reading at the fourth grade by the fourth grade, there's a 70% chance that you will be either on welfare or in prison, right? And we know this, and we have programs. There are some not-for-profit programs out there that are really fighting the good fight to get kids literacy. And listen, there's a lot of things we could do on schools, and I'm a school choice guy, all of those things. Yep, I get it. But if we don't get kids reading, we are going to have this continued problem. Last year, we graduated about half, a little over half, high school seniors couldn't read at the 6th grade level. That means they can't fill out job applications, they can't upskill. Guess what? You as a taxpaying citizen are going to pay for that, either in prison or on welfare. We have got to change this dynamic, and we need to start rallying around each other, knowing, okay, we've got these really big problems. If 10% of young girls are thinking about committing suicide, and by the way, half of our high school seniors can't read at the 6th grade, we have a crisis. And my argument is we can solve all of these things. There's a great reading reclamation program that my wife and I are big sponsors of and believe in, and it's actually taking kids no matter where they're at in the cycle and getting them reading at grade level. So creative things. Why don't we say, listen, if you're in jail, you can't get out of jail until you're reading at grade level. It sounds hard, but they can do this with 6 to 14 weeks. This isn't months or years. It's a really powerful reading reclamation program. Guess what? Those folks can get out of prison and get their lives back together if they can read. A lot of this problem is people can't read. They're not performing at levels that they should. We found some kids, by the way, you got me on my soapbox, sorry. But that we found some kids, they did these assessments that were in high school, couldn't read at the 1st grade level. That's a crime. I mean, think of that. That's a crime. What have we done? I mean, so the teachers had to keep pushing them along, but how are they keeping up with the other kids in the class? This is, to me, and here's the crazy thing, this is a disability of which we can cure. We can solve it. I'm very excited about this reading reclamation program. My argument is let's create a new public service, get people, you want $10,000 off your student loan? Nothing's for free in America. Guess what? You can volunteer to help some of these kids all over the country reading again at grade level. 6 to 14 weeks, we can do this. We just have to kind of rally around it. So get our reading together, get our STEM students ready and prepared to compete against Chinese scientists and technologists. Get our military back in shape where people want to serve, number one, and B, we're giving all the resources and technology that we can to our military to make sure that we're a deterrent, not because we should be fighting anybody, but I want to deter people from fighting. I have my son is in the Navy now. He's a young Navy officer, graduate of the Naval Academy, doing exceptionally well. I served in the Army. My dad was a tech sergeant in the Air Force. We're big believers in service. We need to get these young kids back oriented to the notion that America is bigger than all of us, and you have a responsibility to help us pass this on to the next generation. I think there's these things we can do to get people excited about our country again and get an understanding. Hey, we're going to be different. We're going to have differences. That's all good. That's America. But we got to stop being mean to each other. We have to stop choking each other every time we have a political disagreement. And we have to start turning America back into this notion that we are bigger than our problems.
So, Congressman, I certainly couldn't agree more in the importance of literacy, and love the fact that you mentioned literacy for prisoners. As a public defender, I see firsthand what a difference.
Oh yeah,
that could
I'm
make.
sure you
But
do. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Would love to talk to you more. We'll have you back on again. But right now, it's time for your lightning round questions, and the very first one is about reading. Can you tell us a book that changed your life?
Yeah, this is going to be corny. You're going to think it's something magnificent. It wasn't a comic book. I'll give you that. Yeah. But it was a book somebody gave me. It's called The FBI Story. It was published, I think, in it's either 56 or 58. A guy named Don Whitehead. And I had a friend whose dad was in law enforcement, gave me this book, and I devoured it. And at that point, I said, I'm going to be an FBI agent. That's what I want. It's one of those things that just kind of motivated me to get interested in it. And then I really pursued the kinds of things I thought I would need to be successful at that. So that's the book I would argue changed my life.
That's great. I do want to mention that my grandfather went to the Naval Academy, and my husband and I absolutely love to go to the Navy football games. We try to get to one like every year. It's an experience. If someone has never been to a Navy football game, they need to go.
Oh my gosh, I'm an Army guy. I'm going to tell you this. Don't tell your listeners. I'm an Army guy. We have Navy football season tickets.
Yeah.
We love it.
Secret is
even
safe
when my
with
son
us.
is gone, we still go to the games. Really.
My father was in the Navy, so.
Wonderful. It's really a part of America. I encourage people to go. The tickets aren't that expensive. The football is pretty good, but the environment is it makes you very proud to be an American every time you get out of a game.
It really does. It is just incredible. Like the first time someone will go, it's just like you said, it makes you so proud to be an American. It's fantastic. Yeah. But okay, the second question, because I love to travel. What is your favorite vacation spot?
Wow. Well, anywhere my wife is, I'm pretty happy, honestly. I'm not sure we have a favorite. I think the favorite place that we went was New Zealand. We loved it. That's a place that we've been to a lot of places. We've been very fortunate that way. But the one place we said we would just go back in a heartbeat was New Zealand. We loved Costa Rica. We got engaged in Costa Rica. So we have a lot of favorites, but I would say that one place I'd go back tomorrow would be New Zealand.
New Zealand. Okay. And one last question for you before we go. Who is your favorite politician, living or past?
I have to tell you, so when I was a young kid, I was infatuated with Ronald Reagan, and I'll tell you why. It's because at a time when the country was also pulling itself apart, and we didn't feel like there was a lot of great solutions, he kind of helped bring people back together with his optimistic spirit, and he kept a sense of humor through the whole thing. I thought that was a skill in politics that has really rarely been repeated. And I would say that he's probably my favorite politician for that purpose alone.
Well, I'm sure Congressman Rogers, you got to know there are folks out there who are looking at you with great admiration, and so you're a model for them, just as others have been a model for you. It's been great to have you on today, hasn't it, Pam?
It's been fantastic, Congressman. This is such an honor to have you on. It's so great, and I hope that I meet you somewhere on the New Hampshire Trail, and I do hope you seriously consider jumping into the fray, because I think you have a lot of great things to offer to our country, and I really hope to see you as a candidate.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. It's not an easy decision. We're getting there, and as I said, we're still getting invited back, so we're still coming.
Well, we're going to invite you back, so we hope to see you again. Take care.
Thanks all
so much.
So much.
That was a great discussion, wasn't it, Pam?
That was fantastic.
So now, this is the part of the show. This is going disparate. We don't agree on everything. No. You heard what Congressman Rogers has to say, what he thinks. What did you think, Pam? Did you agree with everything he said?
I did, and it's probably not shocking, right? I did. I do believe, he has a lot to say about China and Russia because when he was in Congress, right? He ran one of the most powerful committees, and also being an FBI agent. He knows all about intelligence. He knows all about, and when he talks about the threat of China, especially, and Russia, but China especially, I wholeheartally agree. It pains me to see, Chinese students just excelling, like he said, at quantum physics or whatever it is. Those kids are learning and they are set to take over the world. And, our kids, like you said, they're fixated on TikTok. They're worried about what's on Netflix. It bothers me because I want us to be the great superpower that we are, and we have to be able to compete with China. And I don't see us doing that these days.
I thought a lot of the things that he said would have resonance with people. I definitely appreciated his presentation style, the way he talks about putting country over party and being civil with, I don't think he used the word civil, basically being civil with one another, which is like a core value that we have on this show. I disagreed with him strongly on a number of issues when I raised the issue of the youth vote and how strongly they feel about guns and climate change and reproductive choice, and asked how he would appeal to those folks. He talked about energy independence, which I think is important. I think that does resonate. I think he's going to lose the youth vote if he starts talking about nuclear power. When he talked about guns, he immediately switched the topic to mental health. And I think that's been a real complaint that Democrats have had, because Democrats think that guns are part of the problem. And so if you're not going to talk about the part of the problem that is guns and how you deal with that part of the problem, I think that's going to be tough. And on abortion, he talked about states' rights, and I don't agree with him, because I think if you leave it up to states, they're going to be states that have no abortion without exception. We're going to see 10-year-old rape victims forced to carry the child. You're going to see women whose health is in jeopardy because they can't get an abortion. So I don't think that states' rights are the answer on that.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to abortion, right? So the Supreme Court just ruled, I know you disagree with it, that it is a states' rights issue.
Right.
So it's currently settled law. I hate saying that. I feel like every time someone it's settled law, and it's like, no, so, right? We thought Roe v. Wade was settled
exactly.
law.
Right.
So I hate people say it's settled law, but right, that's the current situation that we're in. That's the current law. I do think that Republicans have always had an issue with the youth vote. I do think Democrats are better at appealing to, say, like college age kids. I think, for whatever reason, the Republicans have never really been able to get it together when it comes to appealing to youth. Does that mean that all youth vote Democratic? Absolutely not. There's a lot of youth who love the Republican Party. So it's not just Democrats, but I do think when you're talking maybe like a get out the vote, Democrats do it better for whatever reason. And I don't know how you do it, but I have no idea. But I did want to mention in New Hampshire, we have the Seabrook nuclear power plant, and
That's right.
State representative, I got a private tour of that facility.
Oh, wow.
Inside, and it was hours long, and I was blown away. I don't understand nuclear power. I'm just going to say that right now. I don't understand how it works. But I went in there with that tour, and I learned so much and was so impressed. And I do think nuclear power is really important to our future. And I'm obviously not a climate, I'm a climate denier. I'm just going to say it, right?
I'm not. I think we need green energy. I don't think we need nuclear power to be green. Nuclear power scares me. We have all the resources we need to use renewable energy now. We're just not choosing to put our resources there. So that's my position. And
we'll not get to talk to him about, and I wish we had. Maybe hopefully we'll get him on again.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to him about President Trump.
Yes.
Running for re-election, because the congressman sent out a tweet a few weeks ago, a week or two. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was something about he doesn't think that the current Republicans who have announced they're running for president will be the nominee.
I know.
And so I did want to talk to him about that, because also when you hear him talk, he does sort of talk about the country coming together, right? I mentioned that quote because I thought it was really important. The country needs to come together. We need to agree on certain issues. Like, I don't think literacy, right, is a Republican or a Democratic issue. No, that should be an issue that both parties find important. But I really did want to hear his thoughts on President Trump running, because it really is
I did too. And I wanted to ask him if he would support the Republican nominee, whoever they were. So we got to get him back. If he decides to run for president, he's definitely coming back on, but maybe we should get him back anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And it is funny because I could see your face during certain things. And it's like, I was nodding away when he said Ronald Reagan was his favorite politician, because I
cried when Reagan was elected. I worked for Jimmy Carter. He's the first president I voted for. He's my hero.
Laura, okay, super funny. Like, my mom was very prim and proper. She was a lovely woman and she never swore, never. But when Carter was president, on more than one occasion, I was a young girl, but on more than one occasion, my mother would say, he is a jackass, right? And I was like, oh my God. I heard my mom curse like the 4 or 5 or 6 times that she called Jimmy Carter a jackass. Like, I just distinctly remember that. It was
love Jimmy. And I remember when Reagan was inaugurated, some friends of the family had an inaugural ball spelled BAWL. But anyway, we got to wrap it up. But before we go, I just want to let folks know about a couple of guests who are coming on. We're really excited about. Ray Buckley is going to come on. He is the chair of the New Hampshire Democrats. We're going to talk about their first in the nation primary status, how the Democrats in New Hampshire are going to deal with that. And we also got Evan Falchuk coming on. He started his own political party, realized that third parties are not the way to go, and became a Democrat. This is really important because there's an organization called No Labels that is planning to run a candidate that folks believe will take votes away from Joe Biden and possibly return the presidency to the Republican candidate, whoever it is. So we want you to follow us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta, all at Going Disparate. And let us know what you think. We've said what we thought. Our guests said what they thought. Now we want to know what you think. So email us at pamandmara@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Don't forget, we are the place where your political adversary can still be your best friend.
Ain't it the truth? Bye, everyone.